time to enter the grid. Activating HDMI connection. Come with me into the Nokia N8. Nokia released the N8 in 2010. This was the first time they didn't include a keypad or a keyboard on a flagship model. At that time, almost every Nokia phone had some sort of physical keyboard or keypad, making the N8 quite a significant shift for Nokia. They called this form factor a touchscreen monoblock. That's almost like saying monolith. The N8 was also Nokia's last flagship to run Symbian OS, though Nokia did continue to produce Symbian phones for a couple of years after this model, finally ending the operating system with the Nokia 808 PureView in 2012. This was not considered a flagship. I'll briefly mention this model again later. I've explored Symbian in some previous videos. I was a little bit disappointed with the apparent sluggishness of the operating system. In particular, the Nokia N95 and the E90 communicator didn't quite have that snappy usability feel to them. But I'm pleased to report that the N8 user interface feels fast, very fast and responsive indeed. This is an OS that was originally made to be operated exclusively with buttons and keyboards, with Nokia's first Symbian phone being the 9210 communicator from 2001 that I had the distinct pleasure to explore in a video just over a year ago. Over the years, it looks like Nokia have done a really decent job at converting the Symbian operating system to work in a touchscreen environment. Though, looking at this version of Symbian, there are some aspects that are a bit outdated by today's standards. Also, some of these apps and some of the embedded links in the system no longer work today, making a few of the phone's functions defunct. This has made me want to see Nokia's final attempt at updating Symbian, which they renamed Nokia Bell. Nokia did later provide a version of Nokia Bell for the N8. However, with all the update servers now offline, there's no official way to update the N8 to this final version of Symbian. This is where modding communities come into the picture. Not only did these fan communities produce custom ROMs for the N8, but they often based them on Nokia Bell. These custom ROMs continued to be developed throughout the latter 2010s. They helped keep phones like the N8 unofficially updated and in use as they began to pivot to other OSs. Interest in the N8 and these custom ROMs eventually subsided as the 2020s arrived. At some point, I was given this N8, which I added to my collection and thought, one day I should make a video. And recently, it was my great pleasure to be contacted by the lead developer of a new custom ROM for the Nokia N8. Reborn is a newly developed custom firmware with the specific aim to bring the N8 back to life going into 2026 and beyond. I became extremely excited and I knew I just had to try installing this firmware. I'm using Windows 10 with some older Nokia flashing software here, and unfortunately, even after checking everything, making sure the firmware files are loaded and all the settings seem correct, I'm running into a major problem. From what I understand, there are some serious driver conflicts when using Windows 10 while attempting to flash these older models. I immediately get the blue screen crash when I start the flashing process. And this has resulted in a completely dead Nokia N8. But I'm determined to not give up. And so, desperately wanting to revive my N8, I'm persevering. I decided to keep going with Windows 10, as some people had indicated this was possible to use to flash these Nokias. This software also includes a dead phone recovery option. I think I'm doing better now, and it looks like it's actually flashing. I still got a blue screen before the process had finished, but it looks like this made it far enough through to get this phone back to life. After a couple of retries, I was able to flash the main firmware and the ppm configuration files. And there it is, running Nokia Bell. This is indeed a much more modern-looking version of Symbian. Nokia were obviously wanting to appeal in a market that now had the growing influence of iPhone and Android. This custom ROM is very close to Nokia's original Bell firmware, with Reborn's stated philosophy of providing a modern stock user experience without any bloat. They have removed any links and apps that no longer work today, and have done some necessary adding of new features, such as updated HTTPS signing certificates for browsing a more modern web. There's a new App Store app, with simple access to large archives of Symbian apps. This custom firmware is completely free, and the community that are building this are doing this out of pure joy and love for the Nokia N8 and Symbian OS, and it shows. And something I really like? They have removed the Symbian signing restrictions when installing apps, something I really struggled with when exploring Symbian on previous phones. I must say thanks to the creators of this new firmware. I'm really enjoying exploring this phone. There's one important function that I'm very keen to test out on this phone, and that's the camera. But as you can see, the camera doesn't start up on my N8. This error was here before I did the custom ROM install. Part of me was hopeful that this would be a software error. Maybe upgrading the firmware would magically fix the problem. However, that's obviously not the case. So this must be a hardware fault, which means it's time to take this apart and hopefully do some sort of repair. I really like the design of this phone. First, taking these two screws out on each side, and the bottom cover comes straight off. There's some sort of catch lever which is holding in the battery. Removing the catch and the battery simply slides out. At the time, this probably would have not been considered a user replaceable battery. Considering there are Torx screws holding the bottom cover on, I can only think this is a much more user replaceable battery than most things today. To keep taking this apart, I now need to remove the top section, and this is where it gets tricky. There's a mildly hidden screw under the HDMI cover, that part's easy, but then removing the firmly clipped on top cover is really challenging. I tried, but I didn't want to damage the plastic. So I had a look online and found some people using a novel method with sticky tape to grip the top cover and pull it off in a radical dislocation technique. I can now unscrew the 4 screws holding down the display module. I'm trying to be extra careful taking this apart because I definitely don't want to damage anything, especially this display. Once the display module is up, I can unclip the 2 cables. The N8 uses an extremely high quality OLED display at 640 by 360 pixels. This was still the early days for OLED and would have been quite expensive to produce this display at the time. Nokia were really going all out for their flagship phone. Taking out the mid-frame, and there's the main board. I'll just very carefully get that out. This is a very large mainboard covering most of the insides of the phone, as many were at the time. This is so different to today's mainboards that are tiny by comparison. The other side has a lot of blank space, and there is the main camera sitting in a socket. Using a simple piece of plastic, I can unclip the camera module. With the module out, we can see it's sealed up tight. And I bet you're wondering, how am I going to fix this? The answer is, I'm going to use another N8 for spare parts. I have this very beat up and badly scuffed silver N8. This unit has actually been seen in a previous video a few years ago when I needed a phone with an FM transmitter. I was making a video about phone-to-phone analog image transfer, and this old N8 was one of the few that I had that would work. So it's good to see this old N8 back in another video, and the good part is the camera in this N8 works. I can now be faster taking this apart, now that I have a better feel for how it all fits together. With that done, I just need to get this camera module out so I can swap them over. I now have this second camera module in my faulty black N8, and look at that. The camera still doesn't work. That means it's likely the main board in my beautiful black N8 that's the problem. Looking closely at this main board, it looks like the camera socket may be dinged and bent slightly. This is evidence that there may have been some physical damage to this main board, but have a look at that SIM socket. That really gives the game away. There is obvious physical damage to some of the pins on this SIM card slot. It's a bit odd there's so much internal damage, yet the housing on this black N8 is in such good condition. I'm not sure how this happened, but this might explain why this phone is in such great condition. It was somehow damaged, failed to work, and then simply put away. But with the main board swap done, I'm now back to the older version of Symbian running on here, and I need to do the upgrade process again. I would kind of like to keep one of these phones on the older Symbian version, preferably the silver one. Fortunately, there is a method to downgrade Symbian, which I might try out in the future. Something I love doing when exploring vintage hardware is finding all the old modding communities, seeing what kinds of things they were able to do, and trying out as many of the mods that were made as I possibly can. But it's a rare treat to find a new modding community going today for a device from the past like this. I love seeing the passion for mods like this in real time. And there it goes, another blue screen. And that seems to have worked fine. I now have a fully working Nokia N8, and the phone has been upgraded, and I'm really pleased with the results. The camera works well, and the quality is amazing. This is a 12 megapixel camera with Carl Zeiss optics. It's got a xenon flash, and at the time it was by far the best phone camera you could get. In fact, this remained the best quality phone camera you could get for almost 2 years after its release. And it was only surpassed in 2012 by Nokia themselves when they released the 808 PureView, which, as I mentioned earlier, was their final Symbian phone that Nokia made. Be sure to check out Michael Fisher's comprehensive video about the PureView phones and their stunning cameras. At the time, Nokia were the king of phone cameras, and the N8 was a breakthrough for 2010. Just look at that camera bump. Camera bumps were extremely rare at the time. Nokia called their bump a camera island. This is such an Apple-sounding description, but it would be years before even iPhones started bumping up their cameras. I also want to make sure that the HDMI output is working with this replacement mainboard. In the opening sequence, I showed using a standard HDMI cable with full-size to mini HDMI adapters at each end, since the N8 and my HDMI monitor both have HDMI mini connectors. Running a quick test, and it's working great.
How many people born in this century have even heard of Mozart?
I like Mozart.
Oh?
That said, if I'm being honest, I prefer Depeche Mode.
The Nokia N8 was featured in Tron Legacy, and the trailer was included on the phone as a cross-promotion. So with that, it's good to see the N8 now playing some Tron Ares.
I can't put my love of Depeche Mode into words. It's just,
What?
a feeling.
This is indeed a very powerful phone, as can be seen in the quality of games that were made for these latest Symbian phones. One game I really like is Skyforce. This is a touch-based shooter with automatic fire capability. I really like games that try to take advantage of touchscreen interfaces in new and innovative ways, rather than just emulating button controls that often don't work that well with touchscreens. Another amazing game is Protoxide, which uses the accelerometer for steering. This is a really great 3D futuristic racing game, though I'm not a huge fan of accelerometer-based steering on racing games, so I tend to avoid them. With this phone, I can finally try out all the Symbian games that wouldn't have run on previous models. And there's just so many to try out. But fortunately, this Reborn custom firmware makes using this phone a real pleasure. Overall, I'm really enjoying the N8 and its abilities, and I'm extremely impressed by this custom firmware. If you have an N8, keep an eye out as more Reborn firmware updates come in 2026. I want to thank the community that are building this firmware for all their passion and their hard work. I sincerely hope I'm able to bring some more attention to your amazing efforts. I love making these videos. I'm so humbled and grateful for all your support and your time and your attention that allows me to keep doing this. I read every comment and I appreciate you all. But that's it for this one, and I'll see you next time.